Alright, today we're here on Project Sax, and we're here just to talk about the gig. Now, you spend all this time practicing, you spend all this time preparing, you spend all this time just working on maybe a song, maybe a solo, depending on what you're playing, maybe a group piece, maybe a collective concert, maybe I don't know, something in marching band. Depending on what band you're in, depending on if you're a solo artist, etc. Now, you spend all this time practicing, you spend all this time working on a solo, and now you're at the gig. Number one, first thing you're probably going to start to feel is nervousness. Now, like when Marcellus said in one of his videos that you're going to be nervous, that's given. That's already going to happen. But you need to think about the time you spent preparing, things that you could possibly mess up on. Don't obsess over it. Now, this is what I do. Now, I think about the things that I could possibly mess up on and actually correct them in my head as I'm doing it. So I think about the actual event and I run through flashbacks in my head, and then I start to fix it. So I'm like, well, what can I fix on this solo? Especially if I haven't practiced it as much as I could. For instance, I think I've talked about this before, but in this little concert that my high school was having, they asked me to be a guest soloist on a song called I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston. Now, as you know, Kirk Williams, if you don't know him, look him up, Kirk Williams. He plays the solo, and it's a pretty sharp, heavy song, or it's a heavy key signature to play it under. So when I was asked to play the solo, I only had one day to practice it and one day to come up with something in my head. And I mean, it's not necessarily the best, but when you need a saxophone player, I'm the person to call when I was in high school. So, you know, I ended up doing a solo, and the way I thought about it really helped me perform it in one day's time, and practice it in one day's time, and all in that one span. So I kind of ran over how I'd perform it if I got on stage, how it would feel, how my nervousness, would overcome me, while I was on stage. So, those are just some things you think about. When I get on stage, depending on where I am, I try to make myself feel good in a way. So, have you ever been in a store, and you have a little bit of money in your pocket and you're feeling kind of confident? That's how I try to feel when I get on stage. I'm always nervous. It really doesn't matter what audience it is, but it helps if it's the audience of people that I don't know. And for the simple reasons is that if you make a mistake in an audience that you don't know, you're less likely to pass it down. But if you're like a big recording artist, it's kind of hard to outlive mistakes. But if you like somebody like the most of us, where we perform in front of people that we don't even know, it's kind of easy to, get past it. So you kind of give yourself that boost of confidence that, hey, I don't know these people. So, there's some of the things some of the things to think about during gigs. But yeah, I know a lot of people get nervous. So, just calm down as much as you possibly can, and then once you're at that point, if you can get to that point, just try to make yourself feel good about yourself. And then secondly, when you're on gigs, you really want to watch your attire. Attire is a big thing, especially for musicians. Musicians tend to be very prestigious about what they wear, for the simple fact that if you're in a band, you have to wear what everybody's wearing in the band. So concert attire traditionally is white and black. So I don't know how females normally dress, but it's pretty conservative. And males normally have some slacks, black shoes, black slacks, white shirt, and a black tie, or however you want to configure that white-black setup. But most of the time it's black slacks. White is a little bit too extravagant in the slack area for the guys. But yeah, just make sure you're dressed properly. Me, I tend to if I'm playing, unless I'm required to wear a tie as a saxophone player, I tend not to wear a tie, for the simple fact that neck strap. Neck strap, I feel like I'm about to die if I'm on stage and I'm wearing a tie and my neck strap is like so yeah. Another thing on the gig when you want to watch out for is your audience. Now, when you're soloing or you're performing, do not rely on the audience so much. The audience is a really good pump up factor, but when it comes to soloing, you don't really want to rely on the audience too much. Now, when you're getting in the solo and you're getting good, you know, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm really pushing it now, you know, then it's good to get the audience in there. But after a while, you know, if you rely on the audience to, you know, pump up your every move, then you're not gonna actually get the audience into what you're saying. Now, it's kind of like when you're talking to someone. When you're talking to someone, you don't want someone to laugh at everything that you say, right? So don't, you know, try to make that happen, because you're going to end up being annoying. And the same thing goes when you're soloing. A solo is much like a conversation between two people. Now, if you're soloing in front of a live audience, you're pretty much having a conversation with that audience, depending on how you see it. Then you might be having a conversation with yourself to convey to the audience, or, you know, depending on how you see it. But all in all, you're having a conversation. And depending on who you're talking to, most people don't like it when you try to stress laughter or stress a happy moment when it's not a happy moment. It's like someone died and you're trying to make it into a happy moment. It's annoying. Stop it. Don't try to get people to feel the way you want them to feel. Actually put it out there, and then when you climax in your soloing, you should be able to get at least someone's attention. And if they don't clap, that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's all about what you want to put out there. And if they came to see you, they're going to like you regardless if they clap or not most of the time. You know, unless you just completely bomb on stage, you know. Even if you're like a 10-year-old and you don't really know how to solo, but you get up there and you play something worth, you know, hearing at least, hey, you know, and most of the time people will clap for stuff like that. So just watch out for who you try to track when you're trying to play. You know, you want to stay in your own zone and not in someone else's zone. Because most of the time when you stay in your own zone, you're going to get applause anyway, because you're going to stress things that, you know, make sense. Stressing going because you're the one that's playing. You know where the stress parts go. And if you have trouble soloing, then you just work on where the stress goes in your solo and where the dynamics and where the climaxes go in your solo. So that's another thing to watch out for, is the audience factor. Because, you know, audience can really play a big part on musicians, but don't let that really strain you as a performer. Try to, you know, really weed out the audience, but use them when you need them. But yeah, that's pretty much it. As a musician, this is what the things that I've come in contact with when I'm on stage and doing gigs. Just make sure that when you're doing gigs, you know, do your best with what you have, and just know that most of the time when you're doing the gigs, people want to hear you. So don't live up to what the people want. You are what the people want. Now do your thing, you know. Don't try to live up to it on stage, because you already have the talent in most cases. In most cases, you already have the talent. So, you know, don't worry about it. Don't stress over it. Don't get too nervous. Like I said, it's not too bad. I mean, you're going to get nervous, but don't overstress. Don't have any anxiety like, oh my goodness, oh my God, this is the end of my career if I mess this up. Not necessarily. Not in a lot of cases. You can... In most cases, you can redeem yourself, depending on what status you have as a saxophone player, musician. You know, it's not always about what the people have, you know, what the people think, or what the people perceive you to be. You know, it's about what you want to put out at the end of the day. Now, if people don't like it, if you lose your fan base, it's okay. I mean, most of the time, if you have good fans, they're not gonna leave you over one little mistake. And that's what changes a good soloist from bad soloist. But, you know, it's all about what you want to put out. Just remember that. This is Devin, and I hope this helps.